Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an audio check.
Well, hello. My watch, which is synced with the Naval Observatory, says that straight up 12 o'clock here in Colorado Springs. So welcome to our next Linx webinar. Today we're going to talk about risk. We're going to tie it pretty closely to our last discussion where we talked about culture. And I think what's important to understand about the term risk is that far too many associate it exclusively with safety. And we've got a little case study in here that will certainly tie to the safety aspects of risk acceptance. But I think we want to talk about it in a more global sense. So when we talk about risk in aviation or any industry for that matter, we're talking about risk to profitability, risk to customer service, risk to your brand reputation, maybe risk to employee retention, certainly risk to safety. It's a safety issue, it's a quality issue, all rolled into one. Risk is a business issue. So how much risk do we accept? And how do we go about analyzing that? Or do we kind of go by the seat of our pants? So Andy, if you'll give me the next slide or advance the next slide, we'll get going here with our discussion about risk. I call this presentation the swerve. You'll know why in just a second here, but basically I think organizations and the individuals inside of organizations need to change how we view risk. So often we focus exclusively on how to do things safely, especially when we at Convergent deal a lot with safety, excuse me, that we lose a bigger picture of what the benefits of risk are. So in this little picture I've got here for you, which is, by the way, all wrong, we don't want to have a lot of questions about risk. And the second part of this picture that's wrong is that risk and safety can never be allowed to pull in opposite directions. Now, they may never pull exactly on the same heading, but let's just hope we can at least get them in the same quadrant. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next 25 minutes or so. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of an acknowledgement to the title I chose for this presentation, The Swerve. If you read one book this summer, read this one. It's a fascinating story about how one man changed the face of the world. Excuse me here. A little bit of pollen running around in Colorado Springs. This is a story of Poggio Bracciolini. He worked for the Pope, and he was a huge bibliophile. And he found the last copy of Lucretius' book on the nature of things. And he painstakingly recovered that book and pushed that information out. And those ideas were the ideas that sparked the entire Enlightenment. So as we talk about a swerve, I want us to think that each one of us out there have the potential to make this kind of contribution to your organization. And when I say each one of us, I mean it. Whether it's a contractor who comes in and notices something, or a dispatcher, or an administrative personnel, or a CEO, or president, or vice president, or managing director, we all have an opportunity to look at risk from our own unique perspective. So let me give you the bottom line up front here. Growing businesses, that's you guys, right? Linx. They're often formed and driven by dynamic risk takers. You know, when I started Convergent Performance, I had a really sweet government job. It was paying me $133,600 a year, 30 days paid vacation, big staff, really cool reputation. And I walked away from all that to start a small company. And it was a huge risk. I mean, we had big discussions around the dinner table. And my partners and eventually my employees bought into that risk. And so I'm fine with that, but the rest of the world is not necessarily fine with that, right? So we have to make that swerve to balance risk-taking, okay? Risk and reward. And we have to understand that even entrepreneurs have to eventually be able to replicate things, especially in something as high risk as aviation, to be able to ensure sustainable growth. So we may get that initial growth and we're in that grow, grow, grow mentality. But there's going to be somebody out there that says, no, 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 or slow, slow, slow. And we have to be able to listen to them and be able to have a respectful discussion about risk at all levels of the organization. You'll see why that's so important here in a minute. You know what? Risk-averse personnel have to be able to do exactly the same thing. Go from saying, well, this has a 5% chance of not working, so maybe we shouldn't do it. And be able to balance the reward side of that in order to be able to make the swerve back to a little bit more of a risk-taking mentality. So let's talk a little bit about who loves risk and who does not love risk. Entrepreneurs love risk. We just talked about that. Inventors love risk. They love the idea, think of Thomas Edison over and over and over again, putting a different filament in that light bulb, a different gas inside that light bulb, some of which were hazardous and literally blew up in his face. But that's okay because he knew he was pursuing something. He just wanted to get it to work once, right? Big thinkers tend to want to change the world. And in order to change the world, whether it's the world of private jet operations or the world of a consulting firm trying to make human reliability the lexicon of risk management in the world, we are not afraid of risk. And you know what? People like me naturally resist those that say, hey, we got to slow down here a little bit, Bubba. I understand you want to grow this and you want to grow it fast, but let's do it right. Damn it, that just drives me crazy. So let's get it done. Let's get it done. Well, who doesn't like risk? Customers don't like risk. Customers want safety. They want reliability. They want a predictable result. Think about when you go to a new town on business travel and you decide to go out to get something to eat. And right there's a Carrabba's and an Olive Garden and a Chipotle and things that right? And right over there in the strip mall, there's that little Chinese or Mexican or Italian restaurant that you're just not so sure. Now, some of you are going to say, I'm picking the family-owned restaurant every time. And every once in a while, you're going to go in there and have an amazing experience. And every once in a while, after you finish eating, you'll go back to your hotel room and have an amazing experience on the other end of the spectrum, right? So you never know, but you're willing to take that risk because you just don't want that predictable Olive Garden unlimited noodles or breadsticks. So some customers really, really abhor the idea of a risky event. And when I'm thinking about private jet operations, I think they want to know what they get when they step aboard your company and step aboard your aircraft. Regulators don't like risk, right? You know who else doesn't like risk? Insurance companies. Now, interestingly, this last category I'm going to flash up in front of you are people that enjoy risk initially, but then not so much. And that's investors. Investors oftentimes believe in the concept and they believe in you. And then you get the ball rolling and they see the charts, the predictive profitability charts, and they see the money that they can make coming back in from their investment, which was initially risky, but now they're not really interested in you being super risky anymore, right? So that group on the left demands high reliability and predictability to ensure the sustainment of their investment and the safety of the operations. Now, that's especially true with the customers, regulators, and insurers. So let's talk for just a second about risk-taking and high reliability. These are not mutually exclusive, okay? As an organization, they're definitely not mutually exclusive, but within each one of us, they might be. And they likely are because, like I said, some people are much more risk averse than others, and others are much more risk accepting. An interesting study I read not too long ago talks about questions you should ask your surgeon, okay, before you go in for surgery. And one of them is ask about his hobbies or her hobbies. And basically it says if these guys are into hang gliding and freestyle mountain climbing, probably not the guys you want operating on you because they're willing to take high risks. And that transcends from their personal life to their professional life. Right? So a lot of our risk taking is personality based, right? So here's the second part. Because we have people that are risk averse and people that are risk acceptance, maybe even risk seeking, There's a natural conflict in any organization, especially one as dynamic as Linx that is really, really interested in growth. And not only growth, but fast growth, right? So a conflict begins to arise, and please don't throw any names out, or you can look around the table a little bit if you're watching this in a group, between the risk-embracing people and the reliability people. The reliability people always lose. Now, maybe I'm using that word always a bit too exclusively, but usually they lose. Okay? Why is that? Back to our discussion about people that want to grow a business are typically the entrepreneurial type. They're far more risk accepting, and they believe that they can continue to grow and take risks that they took in the beginning. And that's why the reliability people tend to lose, because they're not at the top of the food chain. Hey, they're down in a managing director role, maybe director of safety, maybe director of quality, customer service, whatever it is. But that's only true for a short period of time, or hopefully a long period of time, because then something bad happens. Something avoidable happens. And then the risk-averse people say, I told you so. And they wave that condescending finger of blame, and the risk takers start to hate them even more. You know, why is this important? Because this divide is a culture killer, and a culture killer is a business killer. And in a growing organization, we've got to both make that swerve back to a risk-reward decision area where we're both a little, but we're not doing anything on the fringes, right? We're not restricting growth unnecessarily because of safety and quality concerns, and we're not taking crazy risks out there that could put the whole business in jeopardy. All right, I want to give you a short example right here from our backyard in Colorado. This is actually a headline from a local newspaper. Big lawsuit going on. A couple of years ago, was that when it was, Andy? Anadarko, huge oil company. They own part of Deepwater Horizon. They often measure their quarterly earnings in billions, okay? The big boys, right? So Anadarko, a couple of years ago, had an abandoned well basically blow up, resulted in destruction of several homes and the death of at least 2 people, okay? All sorts of environmental damage, big brand hit. Well, as the process wore on in this investigation, many of the people that actually worked for Anadarko came out and were saying some things that was hard to believe. Actually, not too hard to believe. Here's the backstory of what happened. There were hundreds of these abandoned wells out there, old drilling sites, and now people are building subdivisions and homes around them. And they had identified them all, and they had set aside millions and millions of dollars to go in and make sure these things were all buttoned up and that they were safe and they were drained and they were whatever they needed to do to ensure both the physical safety and the environmental safety around these old well sites. Well, then the price of oil tanked, right? And so they took that money and they decided to put it into profitability. Exactly what they did was they laid off their safety and inspector staff along with a bunch of other people, and they drilled more. They hired more drillers. They had to keep their profitability numbers up for their investors. Oil prices had gone down, so all they could do was increase production. Now, does that sound like a bit of a risky endeavor? You've already identified this huge safety issue. You've decided that now it's not an issue. What's really an issue is prioritization to keep the money rolling in when something that they had no control over, the global price of oil, had gone down. So rather than take the inevitable loss of profitability and shore up their potential brand reputation, they decided to do just the opposite. And it caught up with them. Interestingly, what's happening right now is they're being sued by their shareholders, okay? And some of these shareholders are some pretty heavy-hitting pension funds like the Pittsburgh Steelworkers Union and things like that. So these guys are in trouble. This is going to play out for the next couple of years, but they're going to end up settling for probably billions of dollars. Okay? So what can we learn from this example? What we need to learn is that we need to keep an eye at risk for many reasons. But in order to do that, we have to have a shared mental model. And I'm going to give you a single question that if you can ask of each other, will bring the two sides, the risk averse and the risk seeking, together. So here's the first half of the question. How do we do this new thing? Perhaps never done before thing. How do we do it? So let's take Linx. And I'm remembering from our early discussions that you want to be the world's #1 private jet company. I mean, you want to overtake some big boys out there, NetJets and some of these other guys that are out there. And you're on track to do it. So how do we do this thing? Nobody's ever done it before. First half of the question. That question's being asked by the guy in the cannon, right? Can we do it? The guy on the right, who's the risk-averse person, asks the second half of the question. How can we do this 1,000 times with the same reliable result? Maybe not 1,000 times, but how can we go open up new bases? How can we take on new customers? How can we continue to serve a wide variety of customers? How can we steal business from the competition by being better at what we do? Not just by being cheaper, but by being better. How do we do this new thing, perhaps never done before thing, overtaking the entire industry? And how can we do it in each and every evolution of that with the same reliable results? If you can get yourselves to ask those questions, you've done that magic trick of taking the swerve out of risk from either end of the spectrum. Sounds easy. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why you don't. So here's some things I want you to consider and look out for. Here's the first one. It sounds like this. Hey, let's just go ahead and open up that new base. And as soon as we get it open, we can make it safe later and reliable later. And we'll go audit the heck out of that thing. But right now, the business opportunity exists. We got to jump at it. Okay. If any of these things sound familiar, jot it down. We can talk about it later. Or how about this one? Just this once. I get it that this is a risky endeavor, but we will never do this again. I swear to you. Just kind of bend my way this time and we'll get this done. We'll get past it and we won't do it this way again. Once you set a precedent, you've set a precedent. And quite honestly, if you look back at some of the huge normalized deviance events like the Challenger with NASA, they said that the first time they flew that O-ring out of its design specifications on a cold morning and nothing bad happened, that was the new normal. And if anything, you say, we'll do it this once, and the next time you'll do something even a little further out and a little further out until you're so far out, you can't believe that you ever got there if you were to view it from the place you're at right now. But it's a gradual risk-taking thing. So just this once is never just this once. Or how about this one? You know, back to the guy in the cannon and the guy with the charts, the risk averse and the risk-taking person. I tell you what, I'll do all the growth and mission stuff, and you safety guys do the safety stuff. You keep us safe out there, and I'll do all this other stuff. That's not a swerve. Let me say that again. That's not a swerve. If anything, you're staking out silos of risk people and risk-averse people, and who always wins? The risk people until something bad happens, right? So I'll do the mission stuff, you do the safety stuff, doesn't work. Safety people have to understand the growth potential and the risks that need to be taken. And mission-oriented people need to understand that there's a risk threshold we will not cross. Okay? So don't stake out silos between growth people, sales people, and safety people, because that eventually ends up in an unwanted conflict and will destroy your culture. Or this one, this is what Anna Darko said, and this is literally a quote. Safety is just not a priority right now. Our investors are looking to make those numbers. We're drilling more wells. We can't afford the oversight. Nothing bad's happened. Okay? Call that a minimizing risk strategy. Or wishful thinking. We've gotten away with this for a long, long time. I'll tell you a quick story here. Gosh, this is probably back over a decade ago. I was invited to go out by an insurance company that had some concerns about one of their clients. Great big company you would recognize, flight department for a great big company. And you walk in the door there and they said, we haven't had an accident in 47 years. Okay? That was their safety strategy. you got closer, and everything about that organization was toxic. They'd had hostile workplace complaints, sexual harassment complaints, safety managers fired. They shut down their anonymous reporting system and made people put their names on things, which basically killed their reporting. They had crushed their safety and quality management systems. And I couldn't wait to get out of that place. And when I talked to the insurer afterwards, I said, hey, thanks for sending me out there. I now have a new threshold to measure the bottom from. I said, and they came back to me and said, what are you talking about? These guys have never had a claim, never have an accident in 47 years. I said, they're going to have one. I won't tell you how that story ended, but it ended closer to my prediction than their wishful thinking. And then there's this one, and this is sort of a condescending attitude of the person that raises the risk flag will be labeled and minimized. Oh, he's always nervous about everything, right? Well, we should all be nervous about everything. That's what business is about. We should be nervous about growth. We should be nervous about safety. And that's where we have that mishmash of opinions and thoughts and personalities that allow the culture to thrive inside a rapidly growing organization. But it can't thrive if you allow those divisions to take place. And then there's always the one that safety guys get hit with a lot. Not only do we not get any money to do anything, we get this often. Safety guys don't have the big picture. Well, why don't they? Do you invite your safety and quality people in on the business development decisions? You don't need to let them talk, but at least let them in the room so that they understand. Do they share with the goals, the business goals, the sales goals, the customer service goals? Do you have joint meetings where people can discuss concerns and best practices and new customers and new technologies? Right? All of these things are pitfalls to watch out for. Here's 3 terms that you absolutely need to understand. There's actually 4, but one of them is pretty much the same as the other. And it has to do with your legal vulnerability or your legal risk. Let's say, hypothetically, you have something bad happen out there, equipment damaged, injuries, hopefully nothing more than that, but let your mind wander. Something bad has happened at Linx, and you end up in court about it. The first category is inadvertent error. If someone made an honest mistake, it's likely that this will never go to trial. It's likely that the only damages to your brand or to your finances are going to be related to the exact cost of whatever damage occurred. Maybe you bumped into somebody else's airplane and you need to fix it. Maybe something else, but the damages will be very limited, and the time frame of the vulnerability will be very short. People make mistakes. The legal system gets that. The second's willful violation. This is an interesting one because it shows someone who has been trained and certified to do what they do, that you entrusted with their aircraft or whatever other part of your organization, intentionally and willfully stepped across the line. Now, this one has also got some silver lining because it's usually an individual that does it. And so the organization can't be organizationally held responsible in a grand scheme, although obviously you hired them, trained them, and quality assured them. But usually your liability, your legal risk here is still somewhat limited, unless it turns out to be something like the Gulfstream accident that occurred a few years ago, where they found that the 2 pilots had ceased doing flight control checks almost 100% of the time for years, right? Now you have a systemic issue, right? And that's called reckless disregard. Some states refer to it as gross negligence. Now, what that does to you is it opens up pain and suffering, a legal term, to the amount of fiduciary responsibility you have. So it's not enough to say, I'll fix the hangar, I'll fix the airplane, I'll pay for whatever damage we caused. Now, a jury needs to listen to all of the things that your organization ignored and make a decision based on emotions on how much you should pay the victims, right? So gross negligence, reckless disregard is a systemic risk acceptance in the face of known threats. And as I was talking to you earlier about the case study here with Anadarko, that's what those guys are going to get hit with. Not only are they going to get hit by their investors, they are going to be sued over and over and over and over again. Okay? They got lots of money. They got lots of lawyers. They'll be able to come out the other side of this. Okay? So I want to finish up our discussion here with some things I've kind of put together over the last 15 or 20 years in dealing in high-risk industries. I call it Tony's 8 rules of risk management. Take them or leave them. Here's the first one. You can't have progress without risk. You know, people will say things like, you can't be too safe. Well, I respectfully disagree. You can be too safe if it's restricting your ability to do innovative things like your company is doing, right? But you have to find that right risk-reward balance, and you have to have everybody in the room in order to do that. Here's one I'd like you to consider, and if you do just one thing out of this webinar, I'd like everybody who views it to become a risk hunter, right? Risk in organizations exist in a predator-prey relationship. Risk is everywhere, okay? It's in your people, it's in your processes, it's in your equipment, it's in your customers, it's in the economy, okay? But it works both ways. If you just accept risk is there and you don't look for it and you don't look for every possible way to mitigate it, with your dispatchers, your support personnel, your maintainers, your pilots, your executives, your customer service people, your quality people, everybody needs to become a risk hunter in order to minimize that risk at every level. Why? Because risk and consequences are often nonlinear. The smallest risk to your organization can cascade, especially in this era of YouTube and Instagram and social media, where everything is so technologically tightly coupled, that one small risk can manifest and turn into a domino effect that can topple an entire company. That's why we all have to be risk hunters. A risk to any part of your organization is a risk to all of it. And you can tell now we're building on these sequentially, at least 2 through 4. If you have a small risk in your scheduling department, that could end up manifesting itself in a fatigued pilot flying with a cranky customer into a bad airport at night with an aircraft that hasn't been properly maintained, and all of a sudden, that one scheduling risk blew up into a huge problem. Risk is nature's way of weeding out 2 different types. One is complacent. Hey, we haven't had anything happen here. We don't think it's going to happen. We don't have a lot of energy to put into this risk management thing. And the other is the arrogant. You know, we're Linx. We're company XYZ. Things don't happen here to us, right? Maybe not. But if you're not risk hunters and you don't realize that small things can have big events, then it can happen, and it has happened to companies bigger and better than you. Risk preys on the tired and weary. If I had one thing I would put in every aviation organization, maintenance facility, pilot lounge in the world, it says fatigue is public enemy number 1. But it's not just fatigue to your operators, it's fatigue to your managers. You know, I just think about my schedule here today. From 5:40 this morning until about 8 o'clock tonight, I am packed and racked and stacked with things that have to get done. That's why I love doing this so much. It's a break from the crazy schedule that I have. Well, if your managers and execs are like that over a period of time, they're going to miss things too. And if they're the ones responsible for the quality and the oversight, you can see how this can add up and cascade. This is one that I get hit back on a lot of my quality and Six Sigma brothers and sisters. If you're relying exclusively on process, you're missing something. I often like to say, if you're working on process, you're losing the culture war. People are the risk hunters. Now, they need to have good processes, and they need to have good policies, and they need to have good procedures. Now, here's an interesting thing. If I gave you those 3 words, process, policy, and procedure, and ask you to tell me the difference between the 3, I suspect at the management level, a few, maybe most of you could tell me the difference between process, policy, and procedure. But you get down to the line level, and I suspect those words all sound the same. And in future webinars, and we're going to talk about the difference between a policy, which is general administrative guidance, okay, a process, which is a way in which that guidance implements itself through the organization, and a procedure, which is step-by-step, shall, kind of how we do the work on the line level. And so that clarity needs to come all the way down from management through the line. And we'll talk more about how to do that. That in and of itself is a very big risk management strategy. And then finally, one I got from Vanessa Shaver, who used to be an Army pilot. And I think it was, I know she's watching this. If I get it wrong, she'll correct me in short order after I get off here. Where there's doubt, there's no doubt. What does that mean? It means if anybody out there says, I'm not too sure about this, you stop and listen and make a decision based on that doubt, right? That's what risk hunting is all about. Listening to your people that might have a little clearer insight from where they're at, closer to the problem and closer to the solution than the decision makers have on high. So with that, I want to wrap up. I started out with a picture of Buzz Lightyear and Woody. Buzz kind of pointing toward the sky, Woody all nervous. At the end of the day, when we make the swerve, this is what a good culture of risk management looks like. So with that, I want to say thank you so much again. We're looking forward to our next webinar here in a couple of weeks, and the content and build up to that will be coming very shortly. I don't want to give it all away. I hope you enjoyed this one. Can't wait to talking to you again here soon. God bless. Be safe.